But now I'm starting to be like, is this the right direction? I just know that I have to keep swimming to get there. Not related maybe to what I see as my grand purpose, but I can be weaving my purpose into it, right?
Oh my gosh. I feel so good about myself now. I'm
You
gonna go run around the
should.
block. Hello, listeners. Welcome. Today we are shifting with Katy Mixter, a woman who might be categorized by the title environmental strategist, though other titles would be equally relevant and impressive. Katy's LinkedIn About paragraph highlights her strategy training at BCG, her path there paved by the Yale Schools of Management and the Environment Masters programs. Having studied environment, biology, and politics with a minor in policy economics at Vassar. Yikes, right? What have I been doing with my time? Katy excels at helping teams and organizations navigate extraordinary environmental and business complexity to create clear visions that ally diverse stakeholders into common teams with shared goals. So most recently, Katy's been doing this for Kohl's strategy team. And for anyone outside our island bubble, Kohl's is a major supermarket here in Australia. Now, and I do promise to let our guests speak in just a moment. I mean, all of what I've just shared would be more than adequate to incite me to invite Katy to share her wisdom with us. But wait, there's more. I will now tell you how I met Katy, and you will soon see an even greater purpose to asking her to guest on Shifting. Australian listeners may be familiar with a festival called Seven Sisters. And for the uninitiated, I will quote from their website about what they do. Seven Sisters creates a powerful and safe space for women's voices to be heard, wisdom to be shared, and a place to heal, celebrate, and inspire each other. So founder of that is Dr. Lauren Woodman, and she's a pretty amazing woman to have done this for the past decade. So in November of 2024, I took my 12-year-old daughter and we glamped it up at Seven Sisters. With my primary goal was to bond with my daughter, which I achieved. Thank you, ladies. One workshop in particular caught my eye, and it conflicted with an interesting sounding yoga session that got axed because I told myself I can do yoga all the time. And I do. So what's different about that? So what I do not have access to all the time is to a facilitated workshop entitled Aligning with Your Purpose, which just so happened to be goal number 2 for my attending the festival. I was seeking assurance that I was on the path to doing just that. So it's super hot at the festival, like too hot. And I went to stand outside the tent about 15 minutes before sessions start, and it is good that I did. My daughter had gone off to make a necklace out of macrame and crystals, which was very fun for her. And I'm glad that I showed up early because I ended up being packed into a too tiny tent on a day that was going to reach extreme temps, and the women just kept wanting to get in. They covered the floor. It was amazing. So this without even knowing what you already know about Katy, who you may have guessed was our learned facilitator. So Katy provided us with her credentials, and I'll let her expand on those already mentioned, which made the entire room relax. I mean, I could feel it. It was like some of that hot air had been let out of the room. And she spoke about purpose, getting the audience nodding in recognition of some of the stuff that she was saying, and provided us an exercise that gave us practical, useful information in a 90-minute session. Wisely, I added my name to the Keep in Touch clipboard going around and received a follow-up gift from Katy of an hour of her time to discuss how we might reacclimate ourselves into quote unquote real life post-festival, which I then leveraged into her donating even more of her time to talk with us today. So welcome, Katy.
Thank you. Wow, what an incredible introduction.
Wow, you had a lot, you gave me a lot to work with.
Well, I'm very glad that you enjoyed the workshop.
Yeah, it was amazing. I mean, I'm really pleased that you came to hang out with me today. What else what don't we know after my elongated intro? How else would you like to talk about yourself before we kind of dive into our topic?
Oh gosh, I think you did a pretty thorough description.
Oh, I robbed you.
I guess, it's just to say that one thing I found really interesting throughout my career has been wanting to, yeah, walk with as much purpose as I could. And so I've always tried to kind of cultivate personal development on the side through heaps of different modalities and bring that into the workplace, recognizing that the workplace is where so many of us experience the majority of our lives.
Yeah.
So I guess just to tip my hat to many modalities that some of which I'll reference, some of which I won't, the many teachers and the many different practices that are kind of informing that career path that you just spoke to, and yeah, what I'm really looking to offer today.
That's excellent. And that is why I asked you to join us. But before we get into all of that, you might recall I mentioned that I like to play a little game with my guests. And we've kept you in the dark about the game up until now, except to say that it is pain-free. So are you ready to play?
Sure.
All right. So are you ready to play? What is your current first world problem? That is
Sure.
so I'm happy to go first, but if while you have a little ponder, unless something is immediately sprung to mind for your first world problem.
Hmm. I have a pretty good one at the moment.
Excellent. Bring it.
So one of the things that I've done in order to live my kind of purpose-aligned lifestyle is I have bought myself a van. It's a camper van.
Mm,
And what's amazing about it is that it not only includes bed and, cupboards and everything so I can live out of it, but also a really great workspace. So I could be in the middle of Melbourne CBD, hop in my van and take a client call, and nobody will have any idea, or on the beach. And at the moment, I have gotten a new lithium battery put in, and I have learned that it's not actually enough to sustain a fridge for more than 4 days. So I'm looking at getting solar panels added. How is that for a first world problem?
that is, I'm not sure. Is that a first world problem? That's I think you're going off grid a little bit and you're equipping yourself. I mean, that's a global just a reaction to the way the world is right now, isn't it?
It's true. And it's also wanting to not have to drive in order to recharge the vehicle.
Mm,
And also, I think, yeah, like one of the things that I've loved about it is that for me, it's yes, it's a place that I can call a home. It's also a place that I can let other people have adventures in. And it's also something where it allows for a lot of spontaneity and flexibility, which are values that I have in my life. And so it kind of enables, like, whether I'm living in a kind of four-walled structure or in something like that van, having that ability to really have the microgrid, as you say,
mm.
can support a lot of kind of spontaneity in life.
Yes, and a lot of space. You're not the first lady that I've had conversations with lately, though not on record, who are tricking places out themselves, just going to the lumber store and the hardware store and getting the YouTube videos going and just building their own little Shangri-La on wheels. And I think it's fantastic. And it's got my brain going. So I'll play. And maybe you can even help given your focus in life and your education and everything. I'm currently hunting for a product to maintain the cleanliness of the bowls between cleans without harming the planet with bleach. What products do we have that help keep things fresh in a home with two teens that isn't harmful to the environment? Do you have any help for me?
Well, it's actually such a funny question because this weekend, so we have a tradition in our family that has carried over since my brother and cousins were tiny, where we make Christmas gifts for the entire family. And
Nice.
so decades later, this still goes on. So we still make Christmas gifts for the 13 people. And my brother and I always team up. So the challenge is something that's homemade that is actually useful, that appeals to the full range of tastes within the group. And
Ooh.
one of the things that we're making this year is car air fresheners,
Oh.
which you can basically take felted balls, sew them together with like a little bit of string that goes over then your mirror and the front of the
Mm.
car, and you can add essential oils to them. And so this weekend when I was at the markets, I picked up Kunzia oil, which is an Australian native. It has a really beautiful, slightly sweet, very kind of woody scent. It's a relative of the tea tree and is known for being really good for, in particular, it's microbacterial, very good for lungs. I feel very great about the idea of giving my family Kunzia infused felted ball car air fresheners. And as I've been looking into it, it's got all different kinds of benefits in terms, like much like tea tree or eucalyptus oil, in terms of disinfecting safely household surfaces. Um,
So could we add this to the tank at the back? Like add the
I
essential oil into
would
the
not
tank?
propose
Would
to be
that?
an expert enough. I'm a very newcomer, um, but I'm sure a quick Google squiz would.
I mean, I'm happy for the cars, but that's not helping my problem. Come
It's
on.
true, but yeah, I mean, I guess the tea tree is what I've often heard, tea tree and eucalyptus for all things household cleaning.
Understood. All right. Well, thank you for that. Yeah, so that's my game that I enjoy playing with people. And listeners, you can clearly see why I wanted to talk with Katy today because she's fun and she's got info in all kinds of hidden places. And she and I have landed on a topic, and she kind of hinted earlier that I think is, I mean, maybe it's a wish of mine, but I think it's rising on the relevancy list globally. And that is the impact of personal growth on career path. And I have a feeling you, my friend, might have something to weigh in on that conversational topic because with the, I mean, illustrious background and resume that you've built to date that is for all to see on LinkedIn, I think, where I've met you, would you say that that's a little bit of a road less traveled in
Mhm.
comparison?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, it's definitely something that's been super close to my heart. I've actually at times like when I was working on Citigroup's corporate sustainability team, I actually had a newsletter that went out that was kind of advertising all the purpose aligned jobs that I had access to by kind of being in the know of the corporate sustainability space in the early 2010s in New York City. And when I was in grad school, I actually was ran this program with Net Impact that was all about aligning to your purpose. And I didn't realize that until you proposed this topic today. But if I look back to the very beginnings, there's this kind of notorious story in my family of when I was 3, and I asked my mom if she would live in the house behind me and help me take care of my kids. Because at that point in time, I wanted to be a doctor and a ballerina, and I knew that was going to take a lot of time. And I also knew at the age of 3 that my mother was a grandmother. She was excellent. And so I knew that I needed to start planning for this future.
Staffing.
And so it's always been something that's been really important to me is to be kind of aligned to my purpose. And the goals have changed. Then I wanted to be a politician and then a lawyer and then a business person and then a financier. And then, it's kind of woven as I've gone. And even most recently, it was really I've actually been focused, maybe this is not something I could have added before, but focused on disaster reconstruction. So I focused my MBA and Masters of Environmental Management at Yale on how do we rebuild after disasters in ways
Wow.
that the necessary reconstruction actually makes things better than they were before. And so that, for example, I wrote an report on financing for post-disaster reconstruction. All to say, it's been definitely a colorful journey, but I've also, even though I've had a lot of clarity and purpose, because I've always amused my family by having these giant notebooks, which I would constantly fill with mind maps that are very nonlinear, but always asking myself again and again, what's my purpose? What are my gifts? What are my values? How can I kind of offer the most to the world? And I've been doing that for decades and decades and decades now. And then it's my favorite thing that have been offering to friends over the last several decades as well. I've also hit times where I've lost my way in major ways. So an example is when I was doing an internship in undergrad at Goldman Sachs. And another one was when I was after business school working for a Boston Consulting Group. And I, in both situations, went in with a very clear environmental mission. I was clear about that and upfront in my interviews. And I came in with this strong kind of compass and said, like, to many people's amazement, yes and no to projects, because I had a lot of integrity about maintaining a journey through each of those organizations in a way that would actually allow me to be offering in alignment with my values, my purpose, and my gifts. Both companies also have very strong cultures. And
Mhm.
over time, I found myself starting to care more and more about staying in the culture and staying at that company than actually about pursuing my path. So at both organizations, the environmental work kind of dried up or didn't result in the way that had been originally expected. And I, instead of saying, okay, well, clearly this is my time to leave, I tried harder and harder to fit into what it was that they wanted for me so I could continue to stay. And so I basically was optimizing for kind of this external set of criteria of what success looked like, what delivery looked like, what a good, well-worn path would look like of success than my own. And what ended up happening with both times is that I started finding myself working really long hours, becoming incredibly, because I wanted that external validation, because I wasn't able to validate myself by myself. I started wanting to be what I thought was the archetype, because instead of following my own compass, I was trying to be who I thought they wanted me to be in order to continue to work there, to get the promotions, to kind of continue walking on their path. And I found myself, at once I was working really hard, but I also was not sleeping well because I was asking myself what I was doing it for. And I started feeling quite aimless, taking, having to stay in on weekends to recover my energy and rather than spending it with friends and family, and really feeling like I was losing my spark. So I came in with that strong compass, but what ended up happening was over time, I stopped dedicating myself to it. And in both situations, what I ended up doing was at some point having a moment that said, wait a second, what about all of those large books that I've been filling with my musings and my reflections on my own personal purpose and why I'm here and what I can offer? And in
Yeah.
both situations, what was beautiful is that once I started coming back to myself and why I'd come to those organizations, I started to again be able to work with my managers to say, I came here to do environmental work. How can we make this possible? Opportunities became possible again, just as they had at the beginning. And when it wasn't any longer the right fit because they weren't able to make enough of the opportunities that gave me purpose, then it was very clear what I wanted to go into and find as I stepped into something else. So this is something that I'm incredibly passionate about. I think it's, when we do come back to ourselves, we can step into our full responsibility for leading the lives that we want to be living, right? Like each time that I
Yeah.
lost myself, I became a victim to this relationship that I had with some organization that was larger than me. And I would resent it when its objectives and goals for me weren't the same as what mine were. I
Yeah.
actually sometimes kind of thought of it as like I realized I would be using terms of abusive relationship, but really what I needed to do was define my boundaries and where are my yeses and where are my nos again, just as I'd done when I first came in. And that required me being clear on who I was, what I wanted, and how I was going to then be making the choices that allowed me to step into that full responsibility and agency. And then once I did it with work, I, of course, started choosing everywhere in my life. And it's what allows me to live, I feel like, a very centered but less than traditional life where I can still go between these very classic institutions and at the same time have a strong sense of self
That's
and mission
fabulous
for
to
change.
hear. It's
Thank you.
fantastic. But and I'm wondering too, while you were telling that story about how the culture, the very strong culture in those environments impacted your ability to remain compassed, true to your compass.
Mm.
And did you come out away with a sense of, I mean, you say that once you realigned your compass and found your strength, they were supportive. So I'm wondering, how does the culture break someone down if when you stand up, how is that happening? When you're standing up for yourself, the opportunities arrived for you to do, but you're saying ultimately you had to leave because it was few and far between. So really is the validation that it's best to join the culture then they would be celebrating
Mm.
your compass?
Yeah, I think it's such a great question. I think, in my personal experience, the culture supported me differently at different moments in time. So the difference in a manager had a huge impact on, how much I was supported in terms of being able to say yeses and nos, have them respected and seen as contributing to the team. And of
Mm,
course, my no's weren't hard no's. It was, but always, but sometimes it was. Sometimes it was like, yeah, actually, we don't have the kind of work at this organization that I'm qualified and able to do. And so I need to leave because actually it is no longer a good fit. The types of work that you're asking me to do, I completely make sense, but somebody else should be doing it where that's their purpose, right?
yeah.
And actually, I can then be offering my full passion. And what I get really passionate about is like my life force is behind the things that really are on purpose for me. And so that's something that I can then offer to another organization. And so it kind of depersonalizes fit, I think. And I love to think about like if we're all this kind of all these unique drops of the oneness that is Mother Earth, we're all
Yeah.
given these like unique, exquisite kind of characteristics and personalities and like genetics and everything. And the more that we can express our own like uniqueness, the stronger we are as a population because we all get to then offer the vividness of our unique selves. Well, if we're all trying to be doctors or lawyers, then, actually we have very little diversity amongst us. And there's actually a lot of projection as we, instead of trying to be the best at who we uniquely are, offering that full life force, we're actually trying to project into a very few number of roles. So
Yeah. Can you imagine
sometimes
actually a just lawyer and doctor world?
it's pretty
I think
incredible.
people would be deliberately injuring one another more often for work in the legal field. I don't
Yeah.
know. It's
And
just
where's our
very funny.
teachers? Where's our
Oh,
artists? Like, where's the fun in that life?
how are they
You
learning to
know?
become the doctors? Good point. Very
we
good
we need
point.
our doctors and our lawyers, but and a lot of families kind of aspire to have their children grow up and be doctors and lawyers. There's a lot of logic in
Yes.
that, but at the same time, if we all aspire to be then those doctors and lawyers, we end up with a much less like healthy population and world. So
Do you
yeah.
ever find that as when you do the alignment, right? When you know that you're going in flow, because we have those moments where everything's smooth and you're in the right direction. Do you find that allows your personal blockers to become more illuminated, the things that must be resolved in order to continue on your path? Have you found that?
So it's such a good question. I guess so. I actually think of sharing a tattoo that I got
Of
on my
yours?
25th
Ooh,
birthday. There's a few listening wouldn't be able to see, but it's three little birds who are flying, and it's on my
okay.
wrist, and it's easily covered
It's
up by
not
a
on your
rubber band.
doorstep. Sorry.
No, it's and it's to remind me that in at least in my mind, there's kind of three constant cycles, phases that we're cycling through. The first one is this bird with kind of its wings, like it's flying, but its wings are almost getting a little bit heavy. And it's kind of pumping its wings, but it's kind of soaring. And it's that moment when we start to ask ourselves, actually, I've been headed in this direction. I used to have so much purpose here, but now I'm starting to be like, is this the right direction? Or actually, is it a little bit to the left or the right? Or maybe it's up or down, or maybe it's actually backwards. Right.
Mm.
And so when that moment when we start to actually have those inklings that maybe we're no longer quite going in the direction of that life force and wondering what it is. And it's often an uncomfortable time because we start to question things. And then, the questions get more and more existential. And it can be really uncomfortable because, we've just put together, we've had this life that was, really comfortable and meant that last phase. But now we're starting to say, to kind of disattach from certain parts of it. But it's really powerful, right? Because all of a sudden we start expanding the potential in our world again. We start asking ourselves these questions and saying, actually, do I want to refine my purpose in some direction and asking those big questions? So there's a lot of opportunity in it. The second phase that I have is this bird that's kind of got its wings in a V, and it's just like pumping. It's like, now I know where I want to go, and I am just doing everything I can to get there as fast and efficiently as I can. And that's really hard, right? It's hard work. Often you're saying no to things. You're kind of being really efficient. And sometimes you're kind of like in the middle of the river. You're like, I don't know. I'm not at the other shore. I'm not at the last shore. I just know that I have to keep swimming to get there. And kind of some of that faith. But it's also really great because you really are focused and you have that sense of like purpose and mission. And
Mm.
then there's this other one, this final one, which is kind of this bird with its wings lightly out expanded, and it's soaring. And so that's what I call those moments in flow. So I will get back to your question, but I think of our lives as, a constant process of soaring and then investigating and asking those questions as redirection and then going in that direction. And it's often not massive changes, right? We're often just kind of correcting.
Mhm.
And you can think of life as a spiral as you get more and more close to that kind of key purpose that maybe some people would say we came here to do. But I guess my blockers have often felt like the things that catalyze that existential questioning. And it's actually in learning through what's arisen that I've then asked the questions. I've done that personal work to get even closer and clearer to what is that deep truth that I have, that when I'm in even better connection with it, I can
Mm.
then point my compass that much clearer and start pumping and soaring with that direction. So, I guess I kind of see the blockers often as to those areas that unlock our wisdom if we are able to lean into it. And the process of personal development as what brings us closer and closer to our truth, our authentic self, and our ability to consciously um, take self responsibility for our lives.
I love that you use the word process because, you know, I come from a background of change and transformation. We're very,
Mm,
very big on the process and getting everyone on the journey, don't you know? And I wonder, you know, as you're doing that, are you, because we're looking for tools to help the people along that journey, right? So we look for the tools. And for me, it's about habit development or de-development, if you are devolving. We have to rip out some habits and replace them with something that will work better for the future that we envision. So, have you developed some new habits as you progress through your personal journey and have those changed over time?
mm. Yeah, I love that question. And what a beautiful way of kind of seeing change. It's clear what yeah, how much you can offer to that space. I think for me, one of the key habits that I feel like, for me as well as, yeah, so much of just our generation, like the generations at this time, are really getting increasingly comfortable listening to our emotions
Mm,
and that deep inner truth. I would say, like, one of the things I found is that, there still is a lot of stay strong and carry on mentality,
yeah.
especially within our kind of workplaces. But there's also, a lot of the mindfulness in workplace is also about really starting to kind of bring in those other parts of us as whole humans into our everyday moments. And
Mm,
I think for myself, there's a real practice of, I might not rationally know why I want to cry, but to let myself cry, to let myself get frustrated, to get myself feel joy, even say in the midst of grief. But often when I actually feel those full feelings, what ends up, and then let that energy pass, what ends up is my truths behind the emotion. And again, I guess it just, my own personal journey, I've kept finding that the more that I can come back to kind of what my own deep intuition is saying, the more that I can then offer to the world around and make sense and discern, is this a spot for me or not? Or where can I be giving or not? Where's the time for me to step away? So I guess that's probably been one of the big lessons for me. And I guess maybe one thing just to add on that is like, that's the habit and the practice. And I've also really come to appreciate well held spaces that sometimes holding an emotion by myself is actually too much. And so that's where going to a therapist or a counselor, or maybe a ritual space, a grief circle, or, some, even just a friend who can hold it actually can often allow that to really me sometimes to then go into those places where I face and I sit with those maybe truths that I've always hidden from myself. But once they come up to light, they become the guiding factors. So I guess the habit is listening to my feelings. Some wisdom is recognizing when I actually don't have the strength to do it by myself and I want to bring in community.
I love that the recognition that, grit isn't all it's cracked up to be. And for those who want some more community, there's a lot of offerings, Headspace, you can chat with somebody 24/7. They take phone calls. I know here where I live in Melbourne, you can get office visits pretty easily. And there's others similar. So, reach out to these lovely volunteers usually who are there to provide the community if, maybe you just don't have as many friends as you'd like. I know that I love therapy. I think it's fantastic. Some comedian the other day was making me laugh though, because his thing, and his name is Tom Papa to give him recognition. And he was saying that he was enjoying his life. And so he wasn't going to go to therapy because he knew they would make him stop. I like having a martini at noon and I don't want to stop doing that. So I thought that was quite insightful about motivation. We
Mm.
can talk about great habits to build, and you and I, we are self-motivated ladies and we get out there and we dive in. I wonder it sounds, and you gave us some background. I mean, it sounds like you've always been passionate and driven. Um, I'm curious about the juxtaposition between passion and motivation, because we can be passionate about something and not motivated to do anything. And then fear. I mean, we've talked about blockers in a broad sense, but I'm thinking, is it just the habits that make the bridge between fear and your motivation, or your goal and your, the thing that's pushing you? How do those three things? It's a huge question, but I think you're
Yeah,
capable. Yale did you
it's
well.
beautiful.
Come on, you can do it. If it's too much, let's break it down.
Yeah, no, I love that question. And I love how, yeah, I feel like it really is getting to the crux of so much of, sometimes it can be really disheartening to feel almost like the cognitive dissonance in our lives when we're like, I want to do something. And yet, like as you were saying, there's a blocker or something arising.
Hmm.
And so where do we get that motivation, the passion, the fear? So I guess one thought that I'd have on it is that to me, I think one reason that passion is so important to me is because purpose is so important to me is because I find it quite motivating. I would define our purpose as what we find most deeply meaningful in our lives. And I know for myself, I'm deeply motivated by meaning, and it seems like most people are. And so when I'm clear on what meaning I can make in a moment, I can be doing something that actually is incredibly like not related maybe to what I see as my grand purpose, but I can be weaving my purpose into it, right? So I can be doing dishes, right? Or there's this, I love there was a janitor and man who worked in the mailroom at school, and like I don't know if those were two things that he like aspired to do when he grew up, but man, he would light up when you talk to him. Everybody knew him by first name. He knew every student's name. And it was just such a joy to be around him. And I swear he was living his purpose and he was motivated to come to work because he knew what lights him up as people and having deep philosophical conversations in your every moment. And so he could bring that joy to his cleaning job and his job in the mailroom. And so I think about that when it comes to, when, we always have to do stuff in any role or any part of our lives that we don't want to do. It could be doing the dishes, but when we realize, like, why is this something that I want to be doing? We can often turn those things that we would want to do less into something that feels a little bit more passion driven with motivation. And
Intentional living.
yeah, so I find it just lets me live into those opportunities a bit more. Maybe there is nothing with dishes and that's just something that's important to do, right? But maybe, it's like intentionally cultivating times at work to have coffees with people because like I'm very motivated. It maybe as my example, as maybe I'm guessing the janitor was around people. It's like, well, if that's what's most motivating, let me make more opportunity for me to be deepening the relationships at work because that will let me get more meaning out of work. On
Yes,
the other
absolutely.
side, oh, I was gonna say with your thing question around fear,
Yeah.
I have personally this like little almost like metaphor that I've been traveling with this last year, which is the kind of insight that came to me at the beginning of the year was fear and desire are both driven by our values. They're just very different energies. So our fear is what we value and trying to protect it. Desire is also based on what we value, but it's trying to create it. And so I kind of think of it as like a glass half empty or half full. If I'm looking from a place of fear, I often look at the half empty glass and I try to protect everything that's left. If I'm coming from desire, I say, look, I've got half of my glass full. How can I fill the rest? And so I've been doing a personal practice this year of doing what I call embracing the wisdom of my fear. So I will get myself to stop. And when I feel really captivated by fear, I will literally, I've done this, I've got so many journals filled with this now, but I'll make a few columns. You can see the management consultant in me coming out, and I'll write down
Yeah.
all of the different fears, kind of one at a time in the left-hand column, all the fears that I have. And then I'll go dance, I'll exercise, I'll go have a good chat with somebody, I'll go do something that kind of raises my energy. Then I'll come
Mhm.
back, I'll say, what is the value I'm trying to protect in each of these fears? And then also from that positive place, I'll say, and if I was to claim it, what would I desire? And so that becomes the next column for each of those fears. And then I say, how? How do I go and protect it? And some stuff, it's just literally you have to mitigate the risk. It's like it's a real fear with a real risk. But what I found is that in general, fears are to be listened to but not created from, because I find that I act from a place of defensiveness versus a place of abundance. And so often it's hard for me to claim my desire. I'm acting this way in my relationship because I'm fearful I'm going to lose you. That's very different energy of trying to keep somebody than claiming I desire you. And so I would like to go on a date with you
Yes.
more often or whatever it is, because I think that will cultivate our relationship. All of a sudden it's not saying we never go on dates anymore, it's saying can we go on more dates, because I think this will cultivate our relationship.
Yeah. It's about where
So
you're focusing. Yes.
yeah, so I guess that's a very long way, much longer than you probably expected, of answering a really big question of where do I see passion, motivation, and fear kind of coming together. I guess it's, in summary, it's really claiming my values and using my fears as a wayfinding tool, often to identify my values, but trying to claim them in an energy of desire. And yeah, I guess the clarity of then the purpose that that points.
Go Bulldogs. Seriously, she nailed it, didn't she, audience? I know you agree. No, that was really good. And on your cleaning the dishes, no, we can find purpose in that. In fact, my son, who's 16, just last week was saying to me, we were talking about cleaning, and my children help around the house, which is lovely. One is more motivated than the other to just dive in by oneself, right? And he happens to be the more motivated. And I said, I know you do a great job, thank you. And I know it's not great fun. He says, oh, I feel that we have a really nice home, and when I make effort to keep it that way, then I'm adding to how nice it is. And I just was
Mm.
like, yeah, well done, child, you know?
Yeah, it is beautiful. I actually live in an intentional community, and we were having a conversation just this morning because there's been a few people moving in and out about the importance of us actually having we always kind of have what we call these like visioning sessions where the new
Hmm.
constellation of people comes together and says, what do we want for this new phase of this community. And we were talking about the importance of really calling out and naming, like, where do we get that meaning from, so that we can help each other continue to get meaning out of what it is that we're doing in the ways that we contribute to this kind of community as a whole. But it is different for each person. And that's, I guess, why for me, purpose is such a cool thing, because if I define it as what's most meaningful, often that helps me then weave that through many things, including, as you say, the house chores, but also honoring that it's different for everyone. And so the wisdom of also asking, why do you find the motivation? What is the meaning for you? Yeah, it's beautiful.
Absolutely. And when you're bringing people together, consulting teams, right? We form as project teams and we go through this process. And a lot of times I've been on teams where I've had to add myself later, right? But there's no revisiting, even if they did the team building charter kind of thing in the beginning, where everybody asks those questions of everyone else, along with how do you like to be communicated with, and what's your best time, where's your energy peak, or where can you use support.
Mm.
Just really, really valuable team coming together questions that I think are more valuable than they're getting given credit for in the corporate environment, at least what I observed.
Yeah,
So
I completely agree with you. And one there's a practice at Boston Consulting Group that actually at the beginning of each project you do that. And it's amazing how much it assists a group, because you also can create your norms for that particular team, and you can come
yeah.
back to them, and you can you can even rate yourself against them. How are we doing against these each week? And I think one thing that I really have appreciated since then, leaving BCG but continuing to do that practice, is whenever you feel like you're starting to get off base too, you can always do that mid-project. You can always come back to it. So just the same way that we were saying, purpose is something that we're always getting more and more clear on. I think we as a teams can also always take the opportunity to come together, say, what are we doing here? What are our norms? Or how maybe we set our norms a year ago and now two people are parents, or somebody has gotten really into competitive volleyball and needs more time for that. It's like, we can always take the moment to stop and have those conversations. It doesn't also just have to be at the beginning, because they're so important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Reassess the 80/20, I
Mm,
top of the week, top of the day, even do the
yes.
80/20 real quick for yourself. So that's lovely. And
Mm,
you've been amazing. And so I don't think you've said, but what are you focused on? Where are you headed? What's next? Because that
mm,
feels like you were talking to us from a position of that's what has come before. And
yeah.
perhaps you and your van are going somewhere else once you get the solar panels.
Yeah, so I'm actually in the process of continuing to create the latest, deepening into that purpose, which yeah, for me is I've come to realize, like, my purpose statement is supporting and facilitating people to come together and co-create stronger, healthier future that's more in
Mm,
balance with the world, which is where so much of, everything from, working on Citigroup's global corporate sustainability team and facilitating our environmental strategy to, doing design and innovation practices, and at a place like BCG to kind of help corporate leaders dream into the future. I finally realized, like, well, I have so much passion around this. I just want to do this full time, and I really believe in the kind of way that we build the team. Like, I think all of us as leaders, including and especially in the corporate world, once we do get clear on that purpose, sometimes we think, oh, I'm clear on my purpose, I'm gonna have to leave. But often I find
mm.
it actually just lets us step into even more clarity in what we care about within our roles, so we can be an even better leader, really offering from that place of kind of service. And then in that place, we can create the companies and create the organizations and the impacts and the change that we want to have. And so, yeah, really looking to continue to build and support the team of people who feel connected to their individual purposes, and clear on what they want to be doing in order to align their personal lives with that. And then, removing blockers to, because of course there are those things that come up, and sometimes it is really helpful to have a coach, help us work through it. And then building communities of people who similarly are on that trajectory, because this is something that we can get support in getting our clarity right now, but it is a constant process of refinement. And so building communities of people who are dedicated to being the leaders that are going to figure out what the heck is going on with this global climate and political and everything situation, and how do we actually walk into a future and lead into a future that can help us be more in balance, because we can take a lot of wisdom from what's happened in the past and we need to be leveraging that as much as possible. But also, we're the ones who are co-creating this future and trialing and erroring what's going to work. And so we need communities that where we're all engaging our wisdom, sharing our wisdom, listening to each other's wisdom, and being inspired by it. So I'm doing coaching now, full time, and offering these kind of 3-month transformation packages, I guess you could call it, where
Nice.
one-on-one we do the whole understand your compass, vision into the future you want, then coach through your blockers. And then after you kind of graduate, you can go into the community. And yeah, doing that
Ah.
full time.
Congratulations. And congratulations to everybody who's receiving your service.
Thank you. Well, if anyone's interested, there's a Facebook group that's still pretty new. And so I would love for anybody to join, as we get to kind of co-create what we want that space to be. But it's really dedicated to, yeah, this idea of there's so much wisdom as we walk our paths. Let's get together and be sharing it, because it's not easy to walk an aligned path. And it takes a lot of courage, it takes a lot of conviction, it takes a lot of deep listening. And so let's be exchanging those best practices, so we're all both supported by others in the community, but also by the wisdom that we have. And so that's called Soul Pathers. And we could maybe put like a link in the podcast notes. But yeah, I would love to have anybody who feels called to join that to join. And then if anybody's interested in doing like a strategy session with me, I love nothing more than talking to people about your purpose and what you found, what you've learned in your journey so far. And if there are blockers, what they are, and if there's any ways that either I or anybody I know or any communities that I know could be helping support you, so that you're stepping into your strongest, highest, best self in the fumbly mumbly way that we as humans do, learning all the way.
I love that. And from the workshop that I experienced, as well as the follow-up phone call that you gifted me, I would say it's well worth any investment that anybody can and it's fun too. You're just fun to hang out with, and you know a lot, and you come at things from a storytelling and very, very empathetic and kind perspective. Clearly, some trauma informed behaviors have been soaked
Oh
up by
yeah.
you. Yes, so that's beautiful. Yeah, no, very kind and careful woman, super well educated, so much experience and willing to share. I'm so glad that you came on the
Gosh,
show.
thank you. That's, yeah,
Yeah,
no, that's beautiful reflection, and I really appreciate that. Thank you. And
my
it's been
pleasure.
beautiful getting to know you as well through that entire process. Like, it's my world is so much richer having you in it. So I'm so glad that you came to the workshop. I'm so glad that we got to have that chat, and yeah, to find another kindred spirit and who's doing the thing. Like, I think that was the big takeaway that you got right from the workshop and from our conversations, is just how much you're doing the thing.
I am doing the thing, and to your point, to find others to just at least go, oh, you too, fantastic, right? And I've so never been, if you don't mind, I've never been the person who, oh, if it's happening to other people, then it's okay. That's not a real great. Other people are having trouble too. That doesn't really motivate me or make me feel good. But in this instance, I think it's a community, and it's a shift in mindset, which is why the show is called Shifting, because I've been feeling it for a while, and I've been recording this throughout 2024. So I think you're helping me wrap up this sort of boxed set of conversations that I've had throughout the year and we've learned a lot. And I'll do a summary show for people, but this has just been amazing. And I think landing with you has been ideal, very culmination of my year. So I hope everybody enjoyed listening to Katy. I
Well,
did.
and it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for asking me to join you.
Yeah,
It's
pleasure.
definitely exciting to be part of what you're creating with the shift.
Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste. Like, have you thought about things this way? And then tangible. And like the meditation room, hilariously, I actually the entire time I was at Kohl's had a three o'clock meeting from 3 to 3:30 with myself in the meditation room.
Yeah, and
Um,
you never had trouble getting in there, did you?
no, nobody ever
No,
uses it for anything but like
I
phone
know.
calls.
I know.
I have to say, my like whinge about the Kohl's meditation room is that they have plastic plants in there, which when I was like tapping in energetically, it was always this like, oh, the plastic plant.
Gross, and they
But
smell bad.
at the end of the day, I had to recognize like they're part of nature too. That they came from old dinosaurs. Um,
Okay, you're a better woman than I am. I'm just still pissed at Coles for having fake plants in the meditation room because it's so stupid.
well,
Come
it's like I
on.
get it. It was a retrofit build. They have no real light, so any actual plants would die
Mm.
in there. Um,
Cactus?
I mean,
Cactus
actually, they
needs
could
sun.
replace the light bulbs in there. They totally could do more. They totally could do more.
Yes. Yeah.
But like when I was reading that, right? Like my heart sang. It's saying because there were
Oh,
people that I found that felt like they needed that so much, and like I actually decided on it when I whatever, yeah. Um, but also because it had been a really meaningful grounding part for me when I came into the office.
yeah.
And practice and to schedule that, right? Like actually have it in my calendar was really important because then other people wouldn't put things on it. I'd say, oh, I've got a meeting. And if I moved it, I would move the meeting and then I would have the meditation room reserved at another time. And that I think also like, this isn't part of your article, but just as a like reflection for me, especially as somebody
Mm.
who's increasingly been getting really attuned to like I've always been sensitive, but even the more I listen to myself, right, the more sensitive I get to that attunement. Um,
Hmm.
I think that happens with everybody, but just making it personal. It actually made it really much more easy to get through the date goals because there's a time when I was coming back to myself, cutting everything off. And so it actually made it a lot easier to be the conscious leader,
To come back to the
still
what?
showing
You,
up, um,
mm,
coming back to myself, so to speak, as a like increasingly conscious leader. Um, let's just say like on my own, it was really grounding for me to then maintain that presence, that consciousness all day, because it wasn't just a meditation. It was the chance to cultivate that consciousness in the middle of the day, I guess. I
yes.
don't know if that quite makes sense, but yeah, I found it's kind of like as paths diverged, right? Like I came in with a lot of ways for coping in those kind of environments. And then I found myself choosing to take down a lot of those coping mechanisms. So I was more and more vulnerable, let's say, as I was more and more authentic. So as I'm diverging into this more and more conscious leader, that was really supportive for me, not just in returning to myself and feeling like a grounded, centered employee, but also in actively supporting me showing up as this authentic, conscious leader.
Excellent.
Mm,
I may use that blurb that we just had in
mm,
some way,
yeah.
because that really ties things together